Hello. So the new cycle of Stygian Onslaught dropped this morning, and it looks like all three bosses are trying really hard to force you to play some very specific units, and I find that very cringe, so I decided to not do that. Just like usual, we're not allowed to use 5-star weapons, none of the 5-star characters have constellations, and we will not use the Shilled units, so no skirk or escoffier against the automaton, no lunar charge against the duck, and no Varkan Venti against the mandragora. So without further ado, let's get going right away. We start with the automaton, and Varka is surprisingly good against it. In this team, you have a ton of cryo application, and Varka basically acts like a decent cryo DPS that doesn't require escoffier to function and doesn't have energy issues. Since this boss doesn't attack a lot, and we even have Lila's shield if needed, we can play very aggressive with Varka's combos, and here the best combo I found for this boss is to do N1C, N1C, N2C, then N4E, and one last N1C before switching back to the supports. This lines up the rotation perfectly with the boss's phases and makes our last damage window end right as the timer ends, so we don't have any wasted time. The only mistake I did here is I think it would have been better to do Lila into Chongyun to get a bit more uptime on Noblesse, but it's a pretty minor thing. Now though, I do have to address the elephant in the room. You might have already noticed from the little swords rotating around Varka, but I'm using Serpent Spine here. Usually I try to avoid using Battle Pass weapons, but Varka is kind of in a weird spot where none of the 4-star options really work. Tidal Shadow doesn't work because there's no healer, and even if we're using Escoffier, using her burst would make the rotations too long. Earthshaker doesn't work because it's a cryo team and not a pyro one, so basically the only good free-to-play option is Black Cliff Slasher, which I unfortunately don't have, and I didn't want to spend 34 Stargazer and all of my Mora to level a weapon I'm only gonna use once. However, if you have a really good Varka build, I do think it's possible with Black Cliff Slasher, and something to keep in mind is that since you're playing a cryo team with good uptime of the cryo resonance, you have to be careful to not overcap on crit rate. Other than that, Escoffier is better than Lila, Sucrose instead of Venti can work if you have really good builds, and maybe Rosaria can be good if you play a very low crit rate build. And of course, Skirk makes it easy, Ayaka can cheese it, and Mawika can brute force it with double cryo. Then we move on to the Mandragora, and here it's kind of surprisingly not nearly as restrictive as I thought. Almost all of the clears I've seen use pyro teams with a lot of pyro application, but firstly, Electro is surprisingly good against it. I almost cleared it with Varesa Duran, but I had to keep a Yansan for Knuckle Duckle, so it was a bit cooked. And secondly, you don't need that much of the elements to break the shield. And even then, the only shield you really need to break is the first one, because after that, the boss has reduced resistances, so it's fine if you don't break it fast. So it's actually not really an elemental application check, but rather an AoE check. As long as you get a team that has good AoE, a good grouper, and a little bit of pyro and electro, it's not that bad. Here I decided to use a Novelet team, because we have Kazaha for grouping, and this team has good AoE. And Fischl is more than enough to break the first shield pretty fast. But I've seen people clear it with Arlecchino, I've seen clears with Mawika, I've seen clears with Mualani, with just Pyro MC for the pyro application, obviously clears with Varka and Venti is actually really good here because the boss loses more Nemo resistances than any other element. Duran is good, as long as you can build a good team around him. Dendro is terrible. The boss has insane Dendro resistances, so unfortunately we can't really bring Emily or Kanich here. Talking about resistances, Resred is pretty good here. Unfortunately, Chauvrez is a bit cooked because, well, good luck clearing the small minions playing an overload team without a grouper. And talking about the grouper, Kazaha is good. Sucrose is surprisingly good. Jean can work, it's a bit cursed, but it can work. And I haven't really seen anything else yet. It's still day one, so maybe we'll see some people cook up crazy teams in the next few days and weeks, but for now, that's about all I had to say for this boss. And finally, we have Knuckle Duckle. And honestly, I was not expecting this guy to be the most cringe boss of this cycle. Now, if you look at Knuckle Duckle and remember when he was in the Abyss, you might be thinking, hey, it's not that bad. I'm just gonna bring Electrocharge, like maybe Varessa with Farina or something, and destroy the little ducks in no time. It does not work like this. I don't know what they cooked up with the health values and the Electrocharge multipliers and stuff, but I took more time trying to clear it with a good Electrocharge team than brute forcing it with Overload. Even when I tried Varessa, Overload Varessa was still better than Electrocharged. I don't know what they messed up with the mechanics. Well, they probably didn't mess up, they want you to play Lunar Charged. But yeah, anyway, I found Electrocharged to really not be that good against it. Instead, there's basically two ways to defeat this boss. Either you bring Lunar Charge teams, well, no surprise here, that's what the game wants you to do, or you just brute force it with a ton of damage. Technically, Electro is a little bit better because the boss has low Electro resistances after you kill the ducks, but in my case it was not better enough to justify using an Electro carry over a stronger carry like Mawika. And honestly, if you're trying to brute force, the DPS check is pretty bad. I'm playing Overload Mawika here with relatively optimized combos, a pretty good build, she's top 4% on Akasha, and most importantly there's a C6 Yansan and a C6 Showbirds here, which is a pretty big deal. Anyway, the tips I can give here if you play Mawika is try to back off a little bit before doing the finishers so that you don't target a duck on the side and miss the other ones. After the boss is down, it has a phase where it jumps in the air after an attack, so if it does it during your uptime, just do a finisher so it lands when the boss falls down, saving a little bit of time. And make sure to keep your big damage ability ready for when the boss spawns the ducks again. Anyway, that was it for the video, I hope you enjoyed it. I congratulate Hoyoverse for managing to come up with a worse cycle than the last one. It takes some serious skill to make it this bad. But yeah, anyway, I wish you good luck on your Stygian clears, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!